Hello everybody, Walter here. Welcome to episode 23 of the Let's Play series for Satisfactory 1.0. In the last episode we built the Silicon Valley of Satisfactory, or in other words we started producing things like crystal oscillators, computers and high-speed connectors. And today I would like to go into more advanced steel products, so encased industrial beams, heavy modular frames and motors for the most part. But before we can get started on that factory, we actually need to clean up one of my last old and temporary factory setups, so with that in mind, let's quickly jump back into the game and have a look where we left off last time. And here we are. Now, as I already mentioned, I need a bit more space for my next factory lines, which will be in this area. So I need to get rid of this second layer, because the first layer has already been removed during the last episode. Which also means I don't need all of the various miners that are running into this setup. And also I should handle this conveyor system here, so let's get started on that by for now just adding a sink, and then I'm going to connect that one to power, and I will handle the part over there in a moment. But for now, as I said, the first step is getting rid of all of this here, and while I'm on it I might as well start planning out the layout of the next big factory. And done. I had to make a few adjustments to my plans due to this mini cliff here, but I hope if I only have assembler modules over here I won't run into major issues with connecting everything properly up. All of the clipping will be hidden below the floor, so I can live with it for the most part. Anyway, this is now done over here, so now I think it's time to handle our old school temporary steel production. So basically where all of this stuff comes from, which is all the way at the back there, and also means all of these connections here will also have to go. I just have to be careful because some of those miners here are also connected to my new factory lines, so in those cases I will just have to make sure that I only remove the splitters I added. But for now it's time to get all of this here also cleared up. And that is all of this cleared out, so it's now time for the factory. And for that we're going to start over there in this corner which is sticking out. Although before we get to the building I need a MAM, because I need a couple of alternate recipes. And the first one of those is already at the very top, the Rigor motor. Basically quadruples the output of motors for rotors and stators by just adding crystal oscillators. So if you have a factory for those, this is a very efficient recipe. Then, next up, and I think this is a bit further down, the steel rotor. So not overly resource efficient, but it uses the same inputs as the standard stator recipes, so you can simplify your production lines a bit, which is also the reason I'm using it here. Then, those were the ones I need right now, so I can go with some more garbage recipes. Copper rotor uses screws to boost production, not really something I would use normally. Then we have the classic battery. This is actually a good recipe, since you don't need to make sulfuric acid, you can directly use the sulfur. But in this playthrough I'm not going to use batteries at all, so a good recipe, but I'm not going to make use of it in this playthrough. Then we have the turbo pressure motor. Yeah, you need to package nitrogen gas for this, so you need aluminium and a lot of other stuff. It's not a good recipe in my opinion, there are more efficient recipes. Then let's go down. We have the electromagnetic connection rod, uses high-speed connectors to boost production. Again, not a recipe I'm going to make use of pretty much at all. Then let's see. Caterium circuit board. If you have caterium and plastic lying around, that is a very efficient recipe. But I'm already using the standard recipe for my factory here. Then the silicon circuit board, similar idea. If you have quartz or well, silica as a byproduct from somewhere, it's a very good recipe. And I actually tend to use it in early game quite often. Then let's see, we have the Caterium wire. Not a recipe I would usually use since it replaces copper with Caterium. And then we have the coated cable. If you have some heavy oil residue as a byproduct and you want to get rid of it, this might be an idea. But otherwise it's not really a recipe I use. And then two rod alternatives. So if you have steel or aluminum lying around, go for it. But I don't really see the need for that. And completely forgot I need to start the next research actually. So that is now running. And now it's time for the actual factory. And the first one we need is a quadruple assembler module. And that needs to be removed like so. And you can see it's sticking out over the side because from those, or of those 8 assemblers here, I only need 6. So I will just manually remove the last 2, and then this here will fit perfectly again into the overall shape. But what am I going to produce over here? Well, half of these will produce normal status. So let's get that locked in. And the other half, so the top half in this case, will produce the just unlocked steel rotors. So the output will be actually a mixed stator and rotor suturing line. And yeah, next I'm just going to get rid of those 2 assemblers at the end here and get the basic outer wall for this part here done. And here we go. I also already connected it to power as well as copper wire and steel pipes, so these here are already all running properly. I also already included next to the entrance over here my priority power switch for advanced steel production. Turned it on, and as you can see we already have a decent number of rotors and stators being produced, which we are going to make use of pretty soon. But before that, it's time to get another module in place. So that is one assembler module. And then I actually need one more assembler module right here. And those 16 assemblers will once more half produce stators and half produce rotors. So I just need to connect them to essentially the overflow lines from the module I placed just before these 2 here. And now with the rotors and stators handled, it's time for the motors. So for that I'm going to need 2 of those manufacturer modules. So this is the first one. And then we have the next one right next to that. And these are going to use the Rigor motor recipe I unlocked just a few moments ago. Now I only need 7 worth of those here, so the last 2 will be underclocked to 50%. And since I have a sushi belt over here for the stators and rotors, I'm going to include a little smart splitter here to split it off into the 2 separate lines. And then later on I can remerge everything, but that is something for a bit later. Obviously I will also need some crystal oscillators, but those I can easily grab from somewhere over there at the back where they are actually being produced. And just like that, we have all of the motors we are ever going to need. So, next up on the agenda are the Encased Industrial Beams, or to be more precise, Encased Industrial Pipes. So I'm going to use the overflowing steel pipes from my rotor and stator production, as well as the concrete already prepared over there, and turn it into Encased Industrial Pipes. But for that, I am going to need, let's see, 1, and a 2, and a 3rd module. Although the 3rd module will once more be shortened by 2 assemblers, and the last 2 assemblers then will be underclocked to 50%. And that will handle all of the Encased Industrial Beams you're going to need. And sometime later, this is now all running, although it's not going to run at 100% until I have the Mark 6 belt available, similar to other factories already around. Now, next up, let's grab another assembler module. That goes right there. And then I need the smaller assembler module. Just make sure this is not leaving a gap. So, looks a bit strange, but hopefully that works. And then it's time for one more big module. And if I've planned this out correctly, it should align just like this. Okay, that is looking very, very good indeed. Now, what am I going to produce over here? Well, let's first get rid of the wireframes there. So anyway, what am I going to produce? Well, we have the stitched... Oh, not the stitched iron plates. The steeled frames, of course. So, obviously the steel pipes will come from the overflow again, and the required reinforced iron plates I already have prepared over here. So, once more, all that's left is connecting the various inputs, outputs, and the power wire. And with that done, it's time for the last two modules for this factory here at least. So the first one is going to be one of the smaller manufacturer modules. Of course, the right way around. And this time we don't have any gaps, that's good. And then we have the bigger module, which goes right next to it. And that is also looking pretty good so far. Now, what am I going to produce here? Well, pretty obvious it should be. We are left with basically only the heavy encased frames, and yeah, the modular frames and encased industrial beams we are already producing here, and the steel pipe and the concrete are just overflow from that very same production. So, let's get the rest of this factory here finished. And here we have our first few heavy modular frames. Okay, so next up on the agenda, before we actually start finishing with the roads on the outside here, is working on the connection to the next factory line. Now, I'm obviously running a bit low on space in this area here, so the next factories will be all the way at the back there, within this crater-like area. So I will need a walkway from somewhere over here to all the way down there. I should have enough space in the walkway for the 7 belts and 3 pipes I likely will need to get all of the produced materials from over here to down there. I'll also not build my train station over there as I thought I would do at the end of the previous episode. After shoveling things around a bit, I didn't need the materials over here, so that will also have to be put somewhere over there. So, as I said, the next step is just putting in a plain walkway from somewhere over here with a proper connection point all the way to down there. And half an hour later, I finally have this first step here done, so I now have the beginnings of a walkway with a proper transition into my road system. And since I needed this space here so I could get this roughly in the correct spot, I decided to put in a little parking lot. Of course, I still need to run all of the conveyors and pipes to this spot, but for now, as I said, I'm just going to run this plain and empty walkway all the way to somewhere over there. And once again, this took way longer than I had hoped, but it's now finally done. And now it's time to actually fill this with the various pipes and conveyors. Now for that, I have a blueprint prepared, which is this special insert here. So let me just get in here and put that in position. Yeah, that is the correct spot. So, 2 pipes for nitrogen, 1 pipe for water. And then I have 7 belts And 2 of these will be Mark 6, or will have to be upgraded later onto Mark 6. The others can be Mark 5. So I'm going to put the Mark 6 at the top here, so I can reach them later on a bit easier. And yeah, now I just need to collect the various materials into these conveyors and pipes. And here we go. Took a bit of head scratching, but now all of the various materials are properly merged onto the 7 belts without going over capacity, except, well, for the copper powder and the rubber, which both need a Mark 6. But for all of this here to work, I had to get rid of my dimensional depots, and that means that I'm currently running on borrowed time. So before I start finishing with the build up here, I need to bring all of those belts here from this spot all the way down there to the end of this walkway. And now that we have arrived, it's time to replace our dimensional depots, at least for those 3 belts at the bottom. The other 4 either have materials that are already being stored somewhere else, or are not necessary to build stuff. So, the idea here is pretty simple. We start with storage containers. Then on top of them we will have our dimensional depots. Those need to be connected with conveyors. And then at the front we have a chain of smart splitters sorting out the various materials. And then just connect them together like that. And to whatever is coming in there. And then finally, once I have everything set, I just need to add an awesome sink at the last stage to make sure this doesn't seize up like here and continues working. And as I said, I need to do this for those 3 belts here, and the other ones can be left as a dead end for right now. So a little bit later, the belts are now properly handled. All of the materials I need for building are being stored, and the rest is being discarded. Which means it's finally time to get back to the former main base to finish up over there. Now the first thing to do over here is actually getting rid of this awesome sink here. It's no longer needed. This was just there to get rid of some materials I had in the inventory when I was getting rid of my old factory lines. So, and now we're basically done, at least when it comes to the factories. The last part is just decoration, meaning the raised floor / road with the corresponding decals on the top. Although, for now, I'm going to keep some entry spots open, so I can later on get in here much faster, since quite a few of these belts here still need to be upgraded to Mark 6. Also, in case you're wondering what this here is about, my oil processor produces 30 fabric per minute, and this one here would be transporting 60 per minute. So if I just were to move this directly through, I would have half the time fabric coming in and half the time no fabric coming in. But since I want a more or less continuous stream, I'm using this here to halve the materials flowing through. So yeah, this is just a simple system to get to half of the maximum capacity of this belt here. But aside of that, as I was saying, the last part is for now putting in the floor. Although while I'm here, I might as well grab a few more unlocks, since the hard drives have finished again. So electrode circuit board, if you want to make circuit boards just with oil, this is a good recipe. Otherwise it's a little bit on the wasteful side. Then, this time to steel beams, aluminium or steel with concrete. Yeah, if you have the materials lying around, it might be a good alternative, but I don't really need all of those. Then quickwire stator, in my opinion, a bit of a waste of Caterium. Again, replacing copper with Caterium is not really what I usually use. And then polymer resin, well, usually you have enough polymer resin as a byproduct from your normal oil production, so it's not really a recipe I have ever used at all. Then Caterium computer, again, replacing copper with deuterium. If you have enough lying around, this might be an idea, but usually I'm not going to use this. Aluminium rod, if you have a lot of aluminium, might be an idea. And yeah, that should be enough, so let's start with the next research. And now, let's get started on our roadworks. And a couple minutes later, this is now finally done. The factory floor is in place, with just a gap left over in this corner and somewhere at the back there to later on upgrade the belts. And with that, I think we've reached a good point to stop with this episode here. We finally have our advanced steel production going, as well as a temporary dimensional depot storage set up at the back there in the crater. And in the next episode, we're going to, for one, build our last train station, and for the other, we're going to work on some more high-tier stuff. And that brings us to the end of this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Please like, share, and comment. It really helps with the algorithm. Independent of that, I wish you a nice day, and well, see ya.